The two Jills, a psychologist and psychic intuitive, reveal mind-blowing insights that turn psychology, self-help, and conscious teachings on their heads. Why? Because they work. Real help, sincere growth is here. Welcome to Psyched.
Hi, Jill.
Hi, how are you, Jill?
I am so good. I am happy to be back. I'm psyched to be back, I should say. So I want to set this off because today we're going to do something a little bit different than we normally do. Even though Jill and I feel like that our messages, what we bring to the podcast is always coming from an inspired, what we would call a divine place. Everything that we offer here. You may not know this. Some of you know Jill, but others of you may not know her. And she also really has this gift of tapping into, I would call them like deeper messages and deeper information in there that sometimes maybe doesn't come through fully in the podcast that we do. So being that this is the holiday message, we thought it would be fun for Jill and I to talk about one of the messages that she is going to bring through for us.
So we'll do a holiday message, which can be appropriate for anyone celebrating anything related to the holiday season. I look at my connection to spirit as sort of beyond denomination. If you look at any of the denominational kind of origin stories and founders, they weren't practitioners of that religion, right? Well,
Yeah.
other than Judaism, right?
Hmm.
So for any of these individuals, Jesus wasn't a Christian, right? So for anyone that feels resistant, or I don't know if this is going to be my cup of tea, you don't know because you haven't tried the cup of tea. But so far, what I found in my 10 plus years of sharing is that it tends to be a universal type message. It is very monotheistic. That's my premise. But those that are more I guess polytheistic in terms of like a fire god or an earth god, God frameworks, I find that they find something in it too. So let's just be open.
Yes, and to that end, I was raised in a Jewish family and I love listening to messages from Jesus. And, the more the merrier. Why would we limit? So, yes. All right, Jill, take it away.
Okay, very good. So I'll just take a moment and go within myself. And for those of you that have been listeners, I'm going beyond my brain. So I do that by going inside of myself to other layers of myself. It's deep, deep within myself, like Jill was saying. And it does tend to feel very uplifted and expanded. And this isn't from a brain message. This isn't memorized. It literally is divinely inspired in the moment. So, and I'm sorry for my voice. I'm at the end of a cold. I hope it's the end anyway. Okay, let's see. It's perfect the way we started off so far because we're not particularly attached to December 25th. We're not particularly attached to any certain placement of the moon or the stars or your sun or any of those things. Every day is a capacity for divine inspiration and for celebration, being alive in the human form, the incarnation of the Holy Spirit in the human spirit. And that union is the most powerful thing on your planet. It is so easy to get tripped up by who and where and what. And the stories, and are the stories true? And was it on this day? Was it on that day? Was that person really who people think he is? Did that woman really have a virgin birth? There's so many elements of Jesus' story in particular that cause people to question their own faith, regardless of which faith they find themselves within. But every faith is a human created system, and we want all of them to be an uplifting source that helps you be your most amazing you while helping others be their most amazing them. It is unfortunate that so many faith-based systems have a very us and them mentality and seem to be suppressive towards others' greatness, towards others' inherent gloriousness, and who wins in that system. So yes, this is a holiday message. What holiday are you celebrating? What if it doesn't have to be a holiday? But we'll allow this to be a holiday message. We'll respect that context. So when it comes to Jesus and when it comes to Christmas, there is obviously this usage of the date, December 25th, as the day of his birth, which is, of course, well, to most people, that is questionable. And that's okay. When he was born, maybe isn't as important as the fact that he was born. And what he was really trying to say to all of you. Was that your inherent access to whatever you look at as a higher power is just as real as it was for him. That doesn't take anything away from Jesus or his life or his messages or his legacy. But it does to those that are trying to protect a legacy at the expense of humanity. Humanity wasn't only closer to God or only close to God when he was walking on the planet. And it doesn't look very close to God when one looks around, does it? So maybe there's another way to tell the message. Maybe there's another way to live the legacy for any believer of any higher power, of any greatness, of any grace, of any compassion, and of any hope. A message that includes you, all of you. A message that inspires and uplifts and includes forgiveness for self and includes reminders of what can get in the way and feel like it's getting in the way of you liking you and working to be your most likable you. And maybe even allowing an absolutely glorious you. Those moments when you surprise you by your own greatness, your own glory, that was never about you in that moment. Those moments when you wish somebody were recording it so that you could see you in action, where it felt like time stopped, where you could feel a transcendence within yourself, that you were more than you. You were more than your brain. You were more than your human experience. You were more than any human experience. You were allowing a range of source energy of God in that moment, not by trying, not by efforting, not by training, not by religion, but by grace. Every single human that has ever been on earth and will ever be on earth has that access. That is what he was trying to say. Stories get distorted. Legacies get leveraged. So what can you hear? What can you feel in this message today? Is there any part of you that feels unworthy, guilty, angry, confused, incredulous? Why? Those layers of you are not of God. Those layers of you are part of the human experience, and they may never go away. The ability for you to feel shame or doubt or insecurity or fear or arrogance, that's part of the territory, and Jesus knew that. That's why his messages, when they were not heard as he felt them, as he intended them to be, even by his closest allies, it's just so easy to get the best message misconstrued and heard with just the slightest little tweak that changes the entire essence of access to spirit, to God, and to godliness that is so very much from the inside out of all of you. The ability for each of you to feel forgiven for anything and for everything. It's too much to ask the brain to understand that. So don't ask it to. Don't ask your brain to understand it. How much of a bigger part of you wants to believe that? Because it is true. It is that never-ending grace of God that has gotten humanity this far in the process. The greatness of God within humanity feels so dim, doesn't it? There's probably a lot of reasons why, and maybe they don't matter. You don't have to worry about anybody else's essence of godliness or access or worthiness. But maybe just play with it, almost like a pilot light and a flame that you can increase and decrease. That song, This Little Light of Mine, what if it didn't have to be little? What if it could be as big as a bonfire that's a smoke signal that you could feel from space? Way bigger than your humanness, far bigger than your physicality, and lasting longer than your life. Your light of eternal life, of infinite life, is as bright as you will let it be. Let it be. Allow it to be. How? That's your brain. The brain is not the operator of that light. It is the receiver of that light. What is in your brain that is making your light feel oh so dim or non-existent? The primary barrier to any human allowing and feeling and sensing the godliness they are is what is in their brain. And the brain has its own wiring, and it starts getting filled up the minute you arrive in that human bodysuit. And that is why it feels harder and harder the more fixed your brain gets and the more full it feels. So why not detach from some of the things your brain is so sure that it knows? Why not allow yourself to let go of certainty and be open to your greatness? When have you surprised yourself When was the last time you were like, oh my, that was pretty good. Nice job, to you? Nobody else may have noticed except you, and that's fine. The intensity, the purity of your light, your godliness is not based on audience size or even audience. Being that light is a solo project in so many ways, and Jesus knew that. He did it so well that the attention became solely placed on him. That happens. There's no way of any of us, of any of our godliness to fully be able to predict what the outcome will be. So please notice included in your brain's precognition of what it thinks will happen when you are godliness, and be ready to put any of those expectations to the side. For example, being close to God means that you will have everything that you want. Sorry, your reality doesn't work that way. Being one with God means that you will have perfect health and live forever. Nope. That's not the way your reality works, and it's not the way humanity works. There are many promises with allowing yourself to be at one with godliness from the inside out. But it tends to be more internal than external. A feeling of stillness and quiet. A feeling that there's a range of you that never ends. That goes beyond the stars, that goes beyond space and time. That's how wide, that's how big, that's how real, that's how huge you are as your godliness. And that doesn't take anything away from being alive in human form. It actually makes it more thrilling. To be an occupant of you is a gift that you as godliness gave yourself. As godliness. So for this holiday message, are we celebrating the birth of someone like Jesus? Oh yeah. And we're also celebrating the birth of someone like you. We don't have a scorecard of things we're hoping you ask for forgiveness of or from. We've already wiped it clean. No matter how Jesus's life went. So why are you keeping score? What burden are you carrying and why? What if you just set it down, at least for today, at least for a holiday? Then maybe that's the holiday. That you give yourself a break from the burden that you've given yourself that was never given to you by God. Being on earth includes a sense of a heavy load. Your equipment, your bodysuit is amazing in gloriousness and a full-time job for you. There's enough to already let humanity feel heavy and hopeless. We wouldn't dream of adding to that. If anything, we want to lighten that load with a sense of never-ending hope that is not earned and is not learned. It is allowed and given freely as a gift of love to all. So part of the message of Christianity is, right, will you accept the gift? But it wasn't based on a cross, and it wasn't based on death. It was based on life, the eternal life of source energy that you and every human is a part of. So can you bypass the brain? Of course you can. Can you allow a gift you feel like, well, part of you may feel like you can never earn? Only you can answer that question. We promise it makes life easier, but it doesn't make it perfect. But it does help you be a more glorious you, and even an utterly transcendent you in more and more moments, whether you're trying or not trying at all. And when you fail, that same essence is there to say it's okay. Humanity's hard and Earth is weird. It was forgiven before you even asked for it. And you don't even have to call it a sin. A wonderful indicator of whether you are receiving the gift is how light you feel in yourself, light in terms of weight. Are you feeling more buoyant? Even a little bit is a sign of progress. Don't worry, you won't float away. The physics and gravity have that all taken care of. But being lighter in your light is a gift. And we hope you receive that gift on this holiday message. Thank you.
I love that.
Me too.
I really, really love that. Thank you, Jill.
You're welcome.
I needed that. I really did. I've been
Me too.
feeling so personally heavy in my bodysuit lately. And it really has been bogging me down. You know, I've been talking about that and my health concerns and things that are just, you know, every step I take feels like I'm slogging through mud. And just lately, I have been starting to feel lighter, and it does feel buoyant. It feels like, how was I doing this before? What was I doing before? And I felt myself going down with my ship so much. So that feels really, I don't know, it just feels really peaceful to me.
That's good. Jill, I want to add some sort of visual tools that may be useful to somebody. If you imagine a beautiful swimming pool and you imagine rocks, big rocks, small rocks, whatever, they're all gonna sink to the bottom of the lowest depth of that pool. Some of our thoughts, some of our beliefs create frameworks that are like those rocks, bringing you to the bottom, bringing you to heaviness and feeling like you can't breathe. But there are other thoughts, there are other options for belief systems and operating frameworks. Your beliefs are your operating frameworks. Even atheism is a belief in this definition, by the way.
It is.
There are beliefs that are more like a wiffle ball that will always float. Will it always float? I think it always float. Ping pong ball, let's do that. Ping pong balls definitely float. They're totally buoyant in any water. Even in a wave, they'll pop back up as long as they don't have a hole in it. We need better belief systems. And that's what I've been working on actively for the past 10 years. It's scary AF to even consider that a new belief system is possible and that I'm capable of that and somehow wired for that is absolutely terrifying to a part of my Jill. I'm outcome based, thank goodness, with everything I do. And if it didn't work, I wouldn't use it. But it does work. Because what is working, it helps you be floaty in a sea of heaviness.
I agree. You and I, this whole podcast is that, right? It's like trying to understand that we are operating in a closed thought system. Mm-hmm. And it can be envisioned like a snow globe, right? And just think, all the thoughts you know and you think right now are contained within that snow globe, and they support each other. They're self-reinforcing belief systems. That's where the brain is. It's a closed loop. So now just envision that there is a thought that lies outside of that glass. Those are the thoughts that you and I are going for, not the recycled ones, not the looped ones, right? And that's why we're asking people, I always say, to heal, you have to be out of your mind. And that mind, as you and I discuss it, is that closed thought system. It's full of our beliefs. It's full of everything to date. And it's really just more of the same. And then, as you and I always say, there's more. But you have to jump the track. You have to go beyond the glass. You have to be comfortable there.
And I want to talk a little bit more about there's always more. There's always something new. I think that's the part about humanity that I know, I can speak for myself in this regard. I feel like an inserter of new ideas in this reality. Mm-hmm. There is a part of my Jill that gets incredibly bummed out when I think it's a new idea and someone says, oh, no, actually, that's not a new idea. Somebody wrote about that in the 1800s, or Jesus said the same thing or whatever. And I'm always like, dang it, I was hoping it was new.
Yeah. It felt so fresh.
I felt so fresh. But I mean, even some of the ideas that come through from the inside out system of my transcendence, even if they're not always new, some ideas are great enough to bear repeating. And just because they've been here before, again, I'm outcome based. This isn't working.
Right.
So reality is not functioning. So even if we as source energy in human bodysuits are trying again, like, what if we say it this way? What if she says it? What if he says it? What if we say it here? What if we say it at that point in time? Right? What if a lot of them say it? And let's try this and let's try that. We're experimental in trying to make humanity a more glorious experience as it is capable of being.
I agree with you. I think it goes back to kind of what you were saying, how there are subtleties, right? So many times I've heard this same sentence over and over and over again. And then one day I'll wake up, I'm like, oh, I get it now. Right. And then 2 years later, I'm like, oh, there's more. I get it. So these things, it's not that the ideas, our understandings are new. The ideas they don't have to be new, right? But we're filtering them through some old machinery, which kind of it takes it takes the light out of it. It's almost like the transcendence gets wiped out and then the idea goes. So it's sort of flat when it goes through this processor. It doesn't have the expanded range that when you sit there and start to question what you believe and what you understand and all of that these other nuanced layers, transcendent layers of the same verbiage become known to you, right? And so it is a new experience, even if the words, because we have a limited number of words here, let's be honest, right? I mean, we are making up new ones as we go, but mostly in the tech sector. So I do feel like there's energetic layers that transcend the sentence or the words. And honestly, even the way, the idea, I mean, the problem with what happened to Jesus is that he was sharing these transcendent gems and people were like, they got tweaked and distorted and they got turned into, something that was more oppressive, and we're doing something wrong, and we're all sinners, and we need to be forgiven. And, it just got, I don't know, it just got distorted. And to your point, it's like, if your religion doesn't uplift you, change your thinking about it. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like Jill and I have said, if you don't like yourself within that relationship, or if you don't like who you are within that religion, there's a misunderstanding there. The way you're interpreting it is hurting you, not helping you. That needs to be reassessed. And these things, the brain is so quick, and it's so subtly, I don't know, hijacks a great thought, a great idea, a great kernel of divine wisdom, and somehow you get flogged with it. I don't understand it. I don't understand why we do this.
A great, expansive, uplifting idea that inspires an individual is flattened by a limited operating system, i.e., a limited belief system.
Yes.
Your belief system is your software, right? Your software can be updated. It can even be totally replaced. You can get totally different software.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked a lot about this in the Beyond Beliefs episode, which I do want to refer people to, because there are so many humans that are, I'll just do the executive summary version here, that the challenge for a lot of humans is that they feel they are their beliefs, but you are the operator of your beliefs. You are the operator of your beliefs, right? So when that approach is really allowed, and I can feel some people's systems are sort of like, it's not a freezing as in paralyzed, it's a freezing as in a very transcendent pause going on for a lot of people.
Hold the phone.
And a fuzziness going on of like, whoa, time is kind of playing around. The belief systems that we're operating are in the way of some of these fantastic ideas that do get source energy absolutely psyched.
Yeah. I was writing down as you were talking, I was like, we're God wired. We're not hardwired. We're God wired. And that's kind of the wiring that is our hardware, right? The God wiring is our hardware. The belief systems are the overlay, right? And so those are the things that, they're soft, but we believe they're hard.
Totally.
And because we don't know our God wiring, we believe that our belief system is our heart, our identity. And we don't realize how malleable it is. And in fact, the brain doesn't want it to be malleable. The brain wants to pin you down to a very specific way of being and stray not. It's so interesting how it is trying to, well, let's put it this way. It's not that it's trying to do something. We don't understand. The brain is a color of information. It's an interpreter of data, right? And it is a organizer of that data. And so what it's doing, it's sort of like AI in the sense that it is always updating, it's streamlining capabilities. So it is all about efficiency.
Yeah.
It's incredibly inefficient to someone who's trying to create files to be like, who are we today?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the brain is like, you are today who you were yesterday. Get used to that. Right? So its goal is a little bit different than our goal. Right?
Yeah.
We're trying to expand, and it's trying to, corral the cats over there. Its job is making sense of the human experience. And as you said, it doesn't have access to the divine. We have to bypass that in a lot of ways because it's not amenable to the expanded experience. It can't be quantified. It can't be grasped, right? It can't be understood. infinity, God, beyond, eternal, all of these things just are not understandable to the brain. The brain needs limits. It needs parameters.
Here's the nerdy part of me, and I think this is a bonus for everyone in this community that I get blessed to work with. My brain wants to make it understandable.
Yes.
I nerd out on, what if I say it this way? What if it comes through that way? And when I say I don't mean I as my 5 human senses, Jill. I mean that wider range of me that was part of the message from at the beginning of this. But to me, the biggest, speaking of gifts and holiday, the biggest gift I think I've received as my human Jill is this notion of this unending forgiveness, Jill. I have zero compulsion to take anyone by the shoulders being like, you have to believe, you must understand, right? Once I really understood literally with my brain of, oh, everybody's good. Mm-hmm. Right? Everybody's okay with God, no matter what they do here, right? And I couldn't find that. And I didn't even know I was looking for it in a way. But I remember, I don't need to go into a story there, but I thought I would find it outside of Christianity and in what's often called the New Age, in spirituality, the whole I'm spiritual and not religious kind of, institutions and groups. But what I found is they were just as intent on saving, and they had the same storylines that I didn't like in Christianity. Rapture, anyway, so there was a lot of that. I'm like, okay, in somehow in my constitution as my soulfulness integrated with my Jill, that felt off. It felt wrong. It felt miscommunicated or misunderstood. Doesn't matter which. I was like, that's not it. Right. So then I was like, well, okay. So if it's not that, it's not that. And I have no interest in going about and studying the world's religions. So it's weird to be in a position of acknowledging that I came to a belief system where I'm getting the better sense of answers and truth and God than I found in the slight dabbling I've done. So again, I'm outcome based. Do I feel more like what I would want God to be? Yes. Does that mean I'm perfect? No. And not expecting to be. And it's not that I'm not trying to be, but I hold myself accountable, and I know, thank God, that there's this unending grace for me and for everybody. But that is a totally different framework than I think others have found. So I do get really jazzed when somebody has been a major student of world religions, right? Yeah. They've read it all, they've studied it all, they can quote all these different Yoganandas and all this stuff. And they take a course of mine and they're like, this is the most transcendent teaching I've ever come across. And they're not like me, which is perfect, right?
It is perfect. And you do make sense of the unexplainable. And you do tell it in ways that are non-threatening to people. And that's I think what allows them to hear it. Right. And your sense of your ability of non-judgment, right, comes through so strongly in everything you do. I've been joking around how I'm just spazzing out, with the podcast. I'm just very disorganized and disoriented with, the tech and everything. And you have been so just, making me just feel so peaceful about it. I'll find my way. I will find my way and I'll figure it out. But along the way, I don't feel like I got to do this or Jill's going to do, like there's no pressure. Right. And it helps so much. And I actually have the same, and I offer a lot more forgiveness to other people, than I do to myself, right? We tend to do that as well. But, if you listen to the blame episode, the blame is not, blame is the antithesis of forgiveness, right? Blame is the reason forgiveness is, I guess, required. But in a weird way, that's the loop. Neither of them are required, right? And it's only because we have blame that forgiveness is on the table right now. But if we can go to that space of not blaming, right, then forgiveness is like, of course I'm forgiven because I was never blamed. And that's what the message is, right? Is that you're already forgiven. And I love that. And because it moves into, there's nothing to be forgiven for. And then you start to, I don't know, that's when you start to ease up on yourself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What I'd like to add on to what you just said is there's blame that beckons this need or for the system of forgiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's also just shortfalls,
Yeah.
right? Shortfalls beckon forgiveness and grace.
Mm-hmm.
And shortfalls they happen here. They
Yes.
happen without meaning. Shortfalls happen without intention. Shortfalls happen without warning and without inherent purpose. And
Right.
that was another part of the consciousness communities that I found really just disheartening, was this whole idea of making cause and purpose into everything. And I know that's not the only community of faith and belief that does that, but it's just so unnecessary. There's so much randomness and chaos in my system of understanding of this world that to try to put meaning in everything breaks my heart, right?
Yeah.
It's fine if it's innocent and the moose walks by and you've seen 2 in your lifetime, and what does that mean? That's fine. I that seems harmless. But what does it mean that I lost my child? Someone thinking that. What does it mean that I got cancer again? Mm-hmm. Somebody, that whole system of everything having meaning versus shortfalls just happen in this reality. Right. And it may not be personal or intended or designed for you at all. It just happens, like the weather, like we talked about before.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where, I've said, and I think, I can't remember which podcast it was, but it was, everything happens so you could love yourself more, not less. Mm. Right. And yes, shit happens here for sure. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people are asking for your forgiveness, right? They feel like they're like, I'm so sorry, I screwed up. I'm like, don't be sorry. I don't care. And I mean it. I don't, but I do find that that's still very ingrained, that people are looking for absolution. Right. And, the Jews have the Yom Kippur, and then there's confession. And, so there's, I guess that's what I'm speaking to with this forgiveness. It's like, it's not, we make 1,000 mistakes all day long. We don't even know what we're doing. I'm sure I'm stepping on a million of God's bug creatures as I walk down the street. Like, I'm sure I'm just, if you really want to get into it, committing crime after crime, like this is an unwitting place, and, but it's almost like you can't, that's what dims your light, right? That's what takes you out. You can't be perfect here. Okay. You do your best. We're all just doing our best. And that's what I think.
I do too.
Right. We're all doing our best with the information that we have.
Everybody's doing the best they can with what they know. Absolutely everybody.
Everybody.
I put that test on, Dick Cheney with the Iran, all of that, the Iraq, all of it. What was it? Was it Iran or Iraq at that point? I don't even remember. But anyway, weapons of mass destruction and all of this
Iraq,
that happened there. I even, did my own little kind of experiment with, would that be true of Dick Cheney? If he was on a witness stand with his soulfulness, let's say, with God, And it was asking to Cheney, were you doing the best you could with what you knew? Yes, because there's a count given for how distorted our human
Correct.
systems can be, right?
Correct. Yes.
And that's
So
important to take into account. Yeah,
it
I
is.
love
And we
this.
have to account for the distortion. I think that's what the issue is, especially when you're seeing it on the news or you're, Monday night
Yeah.
quarterbacking, when you're
Yeah.
like looking back at something is where blame comes from, right? And even if something kind of worked out well in the moment, there's still looking back, there's a lot of blame. Blame is a very hindsight backward, and it does take you backward. It takes you in the wrong direction. You told that story about your boss who was trying to just figure out who to blame, and you're like, we got shit to do. Who has time to blame? Who has time to blame? Literally on this planet.
Yeah.
It's literally a waste of time.
I wonder.
Getting all heated.
I wonder if, I mean, given the message part at the beginning when they were talking about that all of us have those moments probably where we were like, oh my God, that was pretty good. My guess is those moments of what I would call transcendence or gloriousness was probably when you were acting on behalf of another, whether it was being, super compassionate and having words of possible wisdom for someone else, and you allowed yourself to get out of your brain's way, right? To allow that bigger, deeper, more loving, more godly range of you to just kind of come up from the surface, up from within, like the sun coming up the horizon at dawn.
Yeah.
Right? You allow it. And there's a part of your brain when in the midst of it happening is probably like, this is good. Like,
yeah,
read this in a card. I didn't study that, didn't take a note of this in any book. This is amazing right here. Right.
Yeah.
And it was original, right? At least for that moment.
And they're not thought out. Those moments are very impulsive.
Yeah.
And in the moment. And I love when those things transpire when I had no premeditation around it.
Yeah.
And the way I do bring those online, just as a hack, and I think that I've mentioned this also before, but it's such a good one, is that sometimes in the morning when I wake up, I can be crabby. I'm not a morning person. And I was like, all right, I'm going to set my value today. And I'm going to make sure that I just hold space for that value wherever I go. Right. And so sometimes, to get me motivated in the morning, because I'm so slow, I could lay in bed till like 11. So to get me motivated, I'm like, okay, if my value is love, is this consistent with that value? And I'll walk out onto the street and I'll look at somebody and, invariably my brain will go to all weird sorts of things, whether it's comparison or I don't know. And then I'm like, is this consistent with my value? When I actually presence my value just a couple of times during the day, then that jumpstarts a different aspect of myself where I sort of move into just a natural rhythm connected to that value. So I do have to jumpstart it in the morning.
Okay.
But then often it will just take root after 3 or 4 reminders, my crabby reminders before my coffees and whatever. And then it'll take root in my day. And it really, that's when people show up in my field that I can help, without going out of my way, without having to volunteer 3 times a week, without having to, set up times to be a good person. It's just very flowy.
Nice. It's interesting because given the abilities and the gifts that I have, I know there are a lot of people in the community that want to know my sorts of systems like that. Mm-hmm. And I find they're disappointed when I don't have that. Right. Yeah. So I think, which is a benefit, right? Because then where there is a beautiful ceremony, it's almost like that you're having, Jill, that is helping you be the Jill that you like best. And I would say more, an even more godly version of you as your Jill Lankler, right? I think that's great. But it's not required. But if it's helpful, wonderful, right? But it isn't required,
No,
right?
it's not required.
So so when I do the retreats and things like that, I just imagine there's some of those that are newer in the community that are just like, which she's not, like, we're not doing a morning service, we're not doing yoga before we go out to the temples in Egypt. Nope. Right. Wait, she's having a cocktail at dinner. I mean, like, I'm blowing their minds with the fact that I'm, not fitting these molds of what someone that does what I do is supposed to be like.
Yes.
And I say the F word and, whatever. I sort of enjoy that rebelliousness because there, in my even 10 plus years of observational research, way too much emphasis on that. For some individuals, there's a there's the brain, right?
Yes.
Preoccupying. These are the systems a person is using. So that must be what is needed to be transcendent. But the transcendence is transcendent of any of those systems. Yes. I know a lot of people that are religious, literally, in their systems and their protocols and their ceremonies and their holidays and all these things, that I can feel the weight of their energy. Their entire system is like those rocks at the bottom of that freaking pool.
Yes.
And I'm not mad at them. I'm frustrated that this reality is so good at making it so hard, and I don't want it to be so hard to be good.
Yes. And I agree. I am not a ritualized person. I'm just a crabby morning person. That's really all I was referring to.
No, this is, I love your example because it's an example of, I know you, right? We're friends. Yeah. You are not a like, no, it's 10 a.m. on, the full moon. I need to do this, right? You're not like that, but you've strategically, that's the perfect example, Jill, that you gave of utilizing your brain in harmony with your transcendence.
Exactly. That's what I need to do. Otherwise, my brain, thank you. That's well said, because my brain has a trajectory if I'm not minding the store, right? So I don't want to get up and be in the back of the bus. I want to get up and be driving the bus. And that's really what just helps me do that. And it's really, I wish it was easier here, but vigilance is required, in my opinion. It's not easy to stay awake. That doesn't mean you have to do anything or be any which way. None of that is required. But if you are asleep at the wheel, your brain is driving the bus. And that doesn't always lead to the greatest places. And so that's really what we're talking about here. Can your brain drive the bus? Yes, but my brain on a daily basis goes off a cliff if I'm not watching it, and it's become less and less. Like I don't have to work as hard as I used to have to work to just, be like, why am I listening to you? It's more natural that I can let it kind of be there without being stunned that it's still coming up with these crazy thoughts. Like that doesn't plague me anymore. I don't think it's a character flaw. I don't think I'm a bad person because I have crazy thoughts. I don't make any of that personal anymore. But there was a while when it was personal and it was painful to be like, who thinks like that?
I just noticed something as you were saying this, and I was listening to what you were saying. Because another gift that I feel like I received from all of this belief system, I guess, this operating system I use, is what I feel as the quietness of my brain. But what I just realized is my brain is probably just as noisy as it was before all of this. Before I was 38, 39 years old and allowed myself to consider a whole new belief system, a whole new concept of me and God and that, integration there. my brain is still just as chatty as it probably was before, but it doesn't feel as noisy because I am more than my brain.
Right.
When your energy field is small and tight, like a tight, wound up little ball, right? It is like, an echo chamber of your brain.
It feels like that's all there is.
It feels like that's all there is. Right. Exactly. So that's what came through in that Dr. Drew interview, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Yes.
so when we can allow a upgraded belief system that allows you to feel like you are more than your physicality, more than just this human life, more than any lifetime you may have, and more than your brain, you have more distance and more room and more choices and more options and liberation that are not exclusive of the brain. It's just more than the brain.
You have more options. You said it beautifully. That's what I call mental real estate, right? We free up our mental real estate because it becomes, look, I will even say my brain was so small, but it was obsessive, right? So my thoughts were much, much worse, much, much worse. I actually you don't have an obsessive brain. Like you've never expressed to me the kind of obsessive shit that I experienced, right? So my brain was incredibly obsessive and it was exhausting. And at one point I can just sit there and I can actually have quiet. I can. Like, so that obsessive, I never knew another way until there was another way, right? So I only knew, and honestly, I thought everybody's brain worked the same way. I thought, as we all do, that everybody's brain is exactly like my brain. So, and then you kind of operate, well, that person's obsessing over there. They're going to remember that I stole their bubble gum in 6th grade. Like you end up thinking that people are noticing things that they're not noticing, that they would never notice, because they don't have the obsessive brain that you had that notices everything and can't let anything go. Right. So through this work, that's when I was like, and I read A Course in Miracles, and in that Jesus said, we are exhausted, we are overwhelmed only by our thoughts. And I was like, oh, then I only have one thing I need to address is my thoughts, not the content of them. That's like whack-a-mole. Right? You can't make yourself comfortable with every thought by rationalizing or whatever, right? That's not going to happen. It's the thought process itself, right? And that's what we talk about so much on these podcasts, right? And then you can get to this place where there's a quiet. And once you get to that quieter place, at least once I got to that quieter place, then I started having access to, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But it was, however, my brain was knotted at the time, really was blocking it out to my awareness. Can't block it out. You can't not be the God that you are, but you can not know who you are.
Yes.
And that's a brain thing.
The visual metaphor I like to offer people is the sun is still shining on a cloudy day.
Exactly. So, and that's why your message was so great, because it's like, what can you allow? What will you allow? It's not that you have to go find it. It's not that you have to make it your purpose. It's not that you have to flagellate yourself or prostrate yourself until, somebody says you're finally a good person. That day is never coming, by the way. You don't need to do any of those things. It's really just allowing. And we're not very good at that.
No. And I'm trying everything I can think of to, that comes to me in terms of hoping to make it as easy as possible. But the add-on to what you just said, Jill, is that godliness operates amidst our brokenness.
Mm-hmm.
So for any of us that acknowledge any degree of less than ideal that we have, none of that's in the way.
Nope.
It can't get in the way, just like a cloud does not get in the way of the sun actually functioning. but it can feel like that from here, from Earth, right?
Yeah.
So that whole idea of, well, I've got to get this perfect before I can, earn my epaulets and godliness and enlightenment and all these things. It's not only, I mean, okay, you can do that, and I'm not worried about anyone that's doing that, really, because I know their actual godliness, their sun is shining brightly and whole and intact, right? But I'm bummed that they don't know it, and because I know how much better life is, literally, how much more enjoyable it is, what a better me I am, right? Operating in this state of grace. And I have cloudy days too, right? I'm getting over a cold, and my mom's going through chemo, and Sam's going to be 13 in February. And I was literally on the floor with him crying. How many hours ago? 7 hours ago. 7 hours ago, I was on the phone. I was on the floor with him crying, because I was just like, oh my God, like this isn't good. He's not good. Like, and it's just kind of having my moment of, and so that realness doesn't stop, and it doesn't have to, and it won't. So don't expect it to, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole different way of allowing transcendence amidst the messiness and the density that is here.
Yeah, and God abandons no one, right? It's not possible to be abandoned by God. And the painfulness for me came from my upbringing in religious school, where God was, you said in the beginning of this message, right, that all religions that we have now and all versions of God that we have now are man-made, right? And that is something that if I didn't revisit, I can remember very early on, like, this God thing sucks.
Well, the Old Testament is freaking harsh.
Well, it's harsh, but so were the people who were teaching me. They were as far from God as I could imagine. I'm like, if this is what God is, and this is me, I was 13 years old, but I'm like, if this is what God is, then I'm out of here. And so for a very long time, because of the way it was taught to me, I abandoned God, right? Because it was toxic. And I think that's how I got so closed and tight. It's because I shut off purposefully any other possibility. As a young kid, I didn't understand that I could say, even though I did ask them, God couldn't do that. Like, I remember the Bible would talk about, the Old Testament would talk about the chosen people. And I was like, the chosen people? What father chooses one child over another child? Like, this is crazy talk. But they rationalized it and twisted it and whatever, that God has favorites and you want to be God's favorite. And the Jews were God's favorite, right? I mean, it was crazy talk, but it didn't feel nice to me. I'm like, that's like an asshole God, and that's abusive, and I'm out of here. So that was where I cut it off. I cut it off, and I suffered. Rather than say, no, those people were wrong. The man-made version that gets passed down, that's flawed. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that I could do that. But I think that's where, even when people who are deeply religious study A Course in Miracles, it is very, very hard for them to let go of, even though this is reinterpreting Jesus's word in an uplifting, the most beautiful way, even talks about where the errors in interpretation are, right? It's really quite beautiful. You say, well, we made a mistake here. We went left, and that was definitely not what I was saying. Right? It's very hard for people to abandon what their original, download was. And that's how easy it is to have God and be so far away from God at the same time, because God is not a man-made, not man understood, not a religion-based entity. I don't even know what to say, right? But it can't be contained in any of those things.
Mhm.
There's no container for it. There's no explanation for it. There's no limit. I mean, it's beyond.
Yeah. And I just, as I'm listening to you, I hear you, Jill, and I do want to acknowledge, and I'm pretty confident I'm speaking for both of us. For those that are inside any belief system, it's not crazy at all.
No.
Right? So for you, for various reasons, there was a predisposition, I think a pre-wiring that you as your source energy put into your Jill, right? In terms of the ability to go, okay, this is like no, right? And then your strategy was, let's just hone in, let's dial everything in to be as unopened as possible to this, because this does not feel right. And you have consistently created working strategies for you to feel now is open to that. And I'm so grateful to the Course in Miracles that it was there for you. Yeah. I wasn't drawn to it. It was recommended to me. So I just want to, I know that some people, when they hear us, I've heard people say this to me. I didn't know you believed or you thought that. And I'm like, wait, where did you hear that? Oh, I heard Jill Lankler say it. I'm like, well, Jill Lankler and I sometimes,
yes, we say different things.
And I'm this Jill. We say different things. We have different complementary, but different operating systems too.
Yeah.
So A Course in Miracles was recommended to me, but I haven't read it. So is it a way for you to feel more buoyant in your light? Yes. Is it the way or the only way? No. No.
And in fact,
create your own path like I did.
Look, for me, it was just breaking the crust, right? So
it worked.
I don't want to say I'm an intellectual, but I'm a bookie.
No, you are. You are definitely
and I like to noodle things, right? So I'm reading, the first time I read A Course in Miracles, I was looking for like the slip up. You know, I was looking for what slip up is going to invalidate this whole text. That was read number 1. Read number 2 was like, I can never do this. I don't even understand what this thing is saying. It reads like a Bible. It's quite dense, right? And so the read number 2 was still very, I'm not worthy, right? But that's where I was at the time. And that's how I read it. Now, when I read it, because I'm open, I'm not saying, like people say they've read this for 18 years. I'm like, wait, right? Like if I don't want to read anything for 18 years, I'm a short-term therapist. I don't want to talk to you for 5 years. I'm not doing my job, in my opinion. Right.
I want to add something to this. Those that are studying it for 18 years and doing all these, work groups and, all those things, we're working through it and all of these things. When I look at that energetically, it looks like they are trying to serve the word of A Course in Miracles. And that's what a lot of religions do. We are here to serve these words, here to serve that conduit of godliness or of Allah, right? But my system is totally upside down from that. It's that use whatever you can to serve you.
Exactly.
Being godliness. Is it serving you?
Exactly.
In other words, helping make it as easy as freaking possible in a really, really dense reality, literally dense and figuratively dense reality, to be the godliness you also are.
And that was my final read. Perfect. And now I don't actually read it anymore because
it did its job for you.
It's just getting you back to you. It's not about the word. It's quite repetitive, right? It's really saying the same thing over and over again, which is kind of what you delivered in your message, right? Which is, I'm no different than you. The God is within you the way it's in me. Shine the light that you are. I mean, it's basically the same message over and over and over again, trying to say it in different ways, written in biblical form, because at the time, it was something that people were still attached to. In the 70s, there was still religion there. right? I don't think it would be written that way today, but it was religion mixed with psychology at the time. It's a very psychological book also. So it had the appeal to me to break me open. But there were definitely different permutations. And really, the last read or anything that you do is always take the best, leave the rest. Right? And if something doesn't jive with you, you could say, that's not jiving with me now. I'm going to table it. A lot of the work that you and I do, when I was coming to you for sessions, I'd be like, all right, I'm listening to Jill Feeler all the time. And then I was like, I got to put that down for a hot sec. Right? Because either I had to catch up. I wanted to have my own, I don't want to get caught up in any momentum, right? I want to be a sentient human being involved in my own process. I don't want to adopt other processes. I want to be very awake and aware of the things that I'm allowing in as beliefs, because as we know, they can be super, super sticky. So I don't want anything in there that I haven't fully vetted for myself.
Yeah.
Right. So be discerning, very, very discerning.
And Jill, I think the advice I want to give for both of us is you and I are so similar in so many ways to what you just described. But not everybody is like us.
Mm-hmm.
There are other individuals that they, for whatever reasons, don't and may never feel that sense of, I need space from something that feels bigger than me so that I can still feel the operator that I am of these ideas. Many individuals, they don't feel like the operator of the ideas. They feel like the consumer of ideas. And they may feel like they're in service to ideas. And I'm fine with all of that as long as it's helping you be a you that you like, a you that you like living, so that you can have, in what already is a hard reality, the most enjoyable, lovable life you can. Right? Yeah. So I just want to acknowledge that for anyone that supports others, and I know a lot of the folks that I know that are listening to the Psyched podcast are similar to us, that they professionally help others, or they unofficially, probably still professionally. They're official helpers or unofficial helpers, but they're helpers. Yeah. A lot of folks that helpers tend to be helping are individuals that don't feel that system within themselves, and that they may never feel that, and they don't have to. It's okay. But there is a delineation there, and I think it's important to acknowledge that.
I think that's fair. I think it's in some ways semantics, right? Because both of these lead to the same place. Like I like myself better. This is the path I took to get there. Right. So it really doesn't matter. I think what we're saying is everybody can get there. It doesn't matter the road that you take. And in fact, all roads lead there, right? Which is the funniest part of all of it. There isn't a specific way to do this. And there isn't a specific way to like yourself better. There's not a religion that's going to necessarily, can religion do it? Yes. Is it a given for everybody that it works that way? No. Some things work for some people, other things work for other people. That's the beauty of this place. Right? So the idea for us is, even if you don't want to like yourself better, we're fine with that. You could listen to this and just for enjoyment's sake and stay exactly where you are. That's beautiful too. And as Jill and I would always say, there's no judgment in that. My line is, I honor where you are. I have no desire to change you. You are with God in my eyes. And that's who am I to jump in if God's there? I just don't feel like I have to do God's work. God does God's work. Right. And that said, God is not an entity outside. I mean, that's a whole question.
I know there's a part of me going, careful there, Jill, because I do feel like, there's this Christian song.
Okay.
If we are, if we are the body, why aren't his arms reaching? Why aren't his hands reaching? Why aren't his feet moving? Why aren't his words teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I mean, this is it. That this, I mean, to me, that's the crux of it, is because so many humans don't feel that they are a part of godliness, they are feeling less godly and acting less godly. And
Right.
I think that's one of the reasons the world looks the way it does. So I want more humans amidst their inherent sense of brokenness, which is going to be different and individualized for everybody, their own sense of it, that is not in the way of them being and acting and feeling godly and loved and compassionate and wise and graceful. Now, there's going to be distortions, and that's where the receiver and the rest of us have still a job to do too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I'm not definitely not shirking, it's the question, are you your brother's keeper? There's a lot of that.
Part. Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of that involved here. And
no, you're right. This is where you and I get really careful of being on the edge of the pool going, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Right. Exactly.
We're trying to not be misunderstood, that there's a lot of ways to take what we've been talking about here, and I have no control over that. You have no control over that.
Right.
But where we're at right now is that part where we go, but please don't take this to mean 10 gazillion things that we don't think work, are not helping people, and are making being one's godliness even harder. Yeah. And there's a long list, I know, that you and I have there.
It is a long list. And, and just from a strategic standpoint, I think a lot of us, definitely me, maybe still, I don't know, we'll have to poll people around me. But definitely in my youth, it was more the cart before the horse. I was going out and looking for, as a therapist, I was looking for what's wrong. Right. And I was focused outward a lot of the time. And I think, getting sick and having, a career where I was always outwardly focused with other people's things that needed fixing, I think bringing me back into myself saved me. Right. Because I would have been ignoring myself in a lot of ways and toiling in helping other people. And it is definitely oxygen mask on first. Like so many people are worried about saving the world, but they don't have peace within their home. Right. So so for me, it's like, let's make sure that the things we're trying to achieve on the outside, we've already achieved them in our really tight inner circle. And if we haven't, let's stay out of the big pool and just work within our, within what's within our arm's distance at this point.
Yeah. And what I'm about to say, I hope it doesn't come across as I'm arguing with you or that you need to defend what you just said. I feel like we all have a different sense of our locus of control, right?
Yeah.
There are many people I come across who are better heard in terms of their wisdom, with their godliness that they're offering the world. They are better received by people outside of their family. So I just want to acknowledge that for some people, that if you don't have to have your family harmonious and peaceful first before, if you feel like peace is a part of your framework that you're trying to assist with. So I just want to make that point. And then the other point is that, I mean, I'm realizing that part of the heavy rock that I probably want to lay down and set to the side is this idea that I have my own version of the obsession with leaving things better than when I found it. And I have no control over how this earth is when I leave it, and neither does anybody else. Mm-hmm. And Jesus is such a wonderful and humbling reminder of that, because he came, he was here, he was amazing. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, the world is worse than when it was there. Mm-hmm. I don't care that we have these. This isn't my metric.
Yeah.
This isn't it. Right. So, I mean, Oh my God. It's just like, Jesus, I literally feel like we're devolving
Mhm.
in so many ways. So he was here and I mean, I just feel like he's like, do what you can.
Yeah.
You guys said it earlier, do the best with what you know, and you have no control over whether you leave things better than when you found them, over how things go while you're there or when you're gone. You can't control your legacy. I've proven that.
Mhm.
Do what you can. It is worth the ride for many of us. It's worth the journey. It's worth making a you to be, and make it as worthy as you want it to be. But try not to overburden yourself with things that are unnecessarily burdensome.
Yeah.
There's a system for that, and it's underutilized.
I like that. I really do like that.
Me too.
Look, I really want to thank you, for, for the message that you shared with us. I really feel like, um, it's always timely, right? To have just like I don't know, just go easy on yourself. We're all here, we're all trying to do our best, let's like take it down a notch, from like, and I do love the example. I always say to my kids, like, not everybody is going to hear you, like Jesus was here and look what happened to him, like it's just, yeah, not everybody's going to hear you. And that's okay. And not everybody's going to like you. I also tell them 50% of the people you meet are not going to like you. Just start there. You don't have to try to get everybody on your side. You don't have to work so hard. Right. And I think that's what this is. It's like, give yourself a little peace this holiday season. Right. I would say leave the rocks at the bottom of the pool, but make sure you swim on top with the ping pong balls. And yeah.
Let yourself be godly. It's a win-win.
It is a win-win.
Anyone that's offended by you being godly or calls you arrogant, they're not hearing you. And there's
50% of the people won't.
Yeah.
At least. But that doesn't mean, right, that you change who you are. You just, you go and be godly. I like that.
Yeah. We talked about this. There's so many of our podcasts I want to reference here, right here. But anyway, just enjoy the library we're creating here. And I hope it's useful, and happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Jill. Love you.
Love you too.